Okay, looking at lesson 1.5 today. This is reviewing some adding and subtracting real numbers. So basically, reviewing how to add and subtract when negatives are involved. And yes, I know some of you are going to say, oh, the calculator tells me that. And I get it. Most of the time you have access to a calculator and you can use the calculator to help. And I'm not against that. Okay. However, it doesn't hurt us to review some rules and kind of remember what these rules are. So, a couple of things. Absolute value. When we talk about absolute value, know that the definition is the distance from 0 on a number line. Okay, so how far is a number from 0 one way or the other? Now, when we talk about absolute value, we use those straight vertical bars. And so what this would be saying right here is this is asking what is the absolute value of 5? So how far is 5 from 0 on the number line? And how far away is it? Go with the obvious. It's 5, right? Or in other words, what is the absolute value of 5? It is 5. Now, what about negative 5? What is the absolute value of negative 5? In other words, like if we look at a number line here, right? Here's 0. 5 was how far? That was 5 from the number line, or from 0. How far is negative 5 from 0? It's also how many units? It's 5, yes? Okay. So the point that I'm trying to remind you of, basically what do absolute values bars do? It takes a number and makes it positive. So absolute value of a positive stays a positive. Absolute value of a negative changes to a positive. So absolute value always makes something positive. But officially, definition is distance from 0. Okay, so there's a little bit of review, absolute value. You'll see a little bit of that in homework. Opposites. Opposites is a good vocabulary word to hear in math. So notice it's the two numbers, the same distance from 0, but in opposite directions. So for instance, 8 and negative 8 are opposites. So when I ask about the opposite, basically I'm just telling you change the sign. The opposite of 8 is negative 8. The opposite of negative 8 is positive 8. Another set, negative 3 and positive 3. Those are opposites. Same number, different signs. So when we talk about opposites, we're talking about same numbers, different signs. Okay, again, vocabulary I want us to remember. Now, let's look at some of these adding and subtracting examples. And I don't know if you've ever seen a handout like this or not. I've used this before when I've taught Algebra 1 or sometimes in some of my middle school math classes when I taught those. But I don't know, maybe to help you kind of with some of these rules if you struggle with them. If you don't struggle with them, then maybe you don't need the handout. As we look at negative 16 plus negative 8, do you know how to add a negative plus a negative? Maybe yes, maybe no. If you're not sure, notice what it says here, addition. And right there, we're adding a negative plus a negative. What happens? When you add a negative plus a negative, you get a negative. So what is negative 16 plus negative 8? Negative 24. Because 16 plus 8 is 24. And a negative plus a negative is a negative. We're only doing adding and subtracting today, so we're not multiplying and dividing. But that is if you go 16 left on the number line and then another 8 left on the number line, you're going to be even farther in the negatives. Now, this one changes things up. Negative 11 plus 9 because we're adding a negative and a positive. Again, if you're curious how my little paper works here, I'm under my addition rules. I'm going to go and look. It says negative plus positive. And then we don't just get a nice easy answer. It says see below. So notice what the rule says there. Subtract the two numbers. Use the sign of the number with the greater absolute value. So when I am adding and I have opposite signs, I don't actually add, do I? If I'm doing negative 11 plus 9, I'm not actually going to add. I'm going to subtract. What is 11 minus 9? 11 minus 9 is 2. And then, which is bigger, 11 or 9? 11 is bigger. And what's the sign on 11? Negative. So what's my sign on my answer? Negative. Any of these rules sound familiar? Maybe. I don't know if you remember how you were taught these or not. They initially these rules initially start showing up in middle school, so. But that's been a year or two, right? Started to say a few years, but some of you are freshmen, aren't you? So. Okay. Negative 9 plus 11. Thoughts on negative 9 plus 11? Yeah, negative plus a positive, if you want to look back here. Actually, that's the rule we just did, isn't it? What are we thinking here? 2, she says timidly. Okay. It's a negative plus a positive, so again, two different signs we're going to subtract. So 11 minus 9 is 2. I agree with that. Now, do we agree with our sign? Which number is bigger, 9 or 11? 11's bigger, and what do we know about 11 this time? It's positive. So this is going to be a positive 2. What about negative 6 plus negative 2? And I would refer to the rule right up above it, if you're not sure. Up above, we did negative 16 plus negative 8, and we got negative 24. What are we thinking about negative 6 plus negative 2? Aylin, can I ask what you wrote down? Too soon? I'm getting a look. No? I forgot you haven't been in here. I've been talking to everybody. I've been making everyone answer. Telling my loud people to be quiet. You don't want to answer me right now? Okay, I'll come back. Lily? Negative 8? Okay, see, there you go. 6 and 2 are both negative. And notice, if it right here says negative plus negative equals negative, right? So we just add them. 6 plus 2 is 8. And we keep the sign. So a negative plus a negative is negative 8 in this case. Okay? Decimals. Okay. How do we do negative 3.6 plus 10.8? And I guess my first question would be to you. It's a negative and a positive. Am I going to add or subtract? It's two different signs. Just like up here, it was a negative plus a positive. Did we add or subtract on these? We subtracted, yes? So let's subtract now. Do you remember how to subtract decimals without a calculator? Okay. I'm going to say, let's go ahead and just line up our decimal points. When you subtract, always put the bigger number on top. So I'm going to say 10.8 minus 3.6. Notice I lined up my decimals. 8 minus 6 is 2. I'm going to carry that decimal point down. 10 minus 3 is 7. So my answer is some kind of 7.2. Oops. Okay, my answer was some kind of 7.2. Positive 7.2 or negative 7.2? Positive. 10.8 is bigger, right? 10.8 is bigger. And that's positive, so 7.2 is positive. Okay. Is this the scariest one of all? I don't know how we feel about fractions, but fractions are usually scary, so. Now, okay, what's the rule? In order to add or subtract fractions, what has to be true? You have to have a common denominator. Yep. In order to add and subtract fractions, we have to have a common denominator. So, my question to you, we're going to work through this together. What can 3 and 5 both multiply into? $15. So we're going to set this up, and we're going to get a denominator of 15. So we'll write denominators of 15 on both of these. I haven't even addressed the issue of whether we're actually going to add or subtract the numbers here. This 3 right here. Okay, this 3 right here needs to become 15. How do I make 3 become 15? What am I going to multiply 3 by to get 15? And we're going to do 3 by 5. I'm seeing some hands. Perfect. Now, if I multiply 3 by 5, what you do to the denominator, we're going to do to the numerator, the top. And 2 times 5 is 10. Same thing with our other fraction. Jason, 5 times what is going to give me 15 here? What? 3. And if we multiply the bottom by 3, we're going to multiply that top by 3. 3 times 3 is 9. Okay. Now we said we had to have a common denominator to add or subtract, yes? So what's the denominator of my answer going to be? It's going to be 15. And all you really have to decide is how do I do negative 10 plus negative 9? So look back over here. How did I do a negative plus a negative the other 2 times I did it? What is negative 10 plus negative 9? What? No, not negative 1. How did I get 8 over here earlier? I didn't subtract them, I added them. 6 plus...
Okay, it would be negative 19.
Yeah. Negative 10 plus negative 9 is going to be negative 19. And I think that's how I have it left in my notes. So that's probably what Math Excel would want there. Okay. We kind of know how to do fractions, right? We just have to remember.
I knew how to do it, I just forgot the numerator and
Okay.
denominator part.
Okay. So as you look at the top half of these, all of these problems had what, even though some of them we added and some of them we subtracted, all of these problems had what type of sign in the middle? They were all addition problems, weren't they? So all of those, we were technically using our addition rules here. Even though sometimes we add, sometimes we subtract. Now, what do you notice on the bottom half here? They all have a subtraction sign. Now, I don't know how have you guys heard subtraction. I teach keep, change, opposite.
We didn't keep it, change it, flip it.
Keep it, change it, flip it. Okay. Same idea, right? I've heard variations over the years. So the idea is when I'm subtracting with negatives involved, keep says we're going to keep -3. Okay? So that's the keep or keep it. Change or change it. What are we changing a minus to? We're changing a subtraction sign to an addition sign. And then I say opposite, as in what's the opposite of -5? And that's a +5. Okay. So my -3 minus -5 just now became -3 plus 5. Now, if you notice up here, if you're looking at the rules at all, it says keep, change, opposite. Keep the first number the same. Change subtraction to addition. Change the sign of the following number. Then what? Follow the rules for addition. How do we add a negative and a positive? In order to add a negative and a positive, it says to subtract the two numbers and use the sign of the larger number. So if we subtract these two, 5 minus 3 is what? 2. +2 or -2? +2, because 5 is bigger and positive in that previous statement. Okay, another one. -15 minus 4. I'm going to suggest I see a subtraction sign, so keep what? Keep -15. Change subtraction to addition. And what's the opposite of 4? -4. So now I'm looking at -15 plus -4 is what that just became. Negative plus negative is a negative. And that's under the adding rules. It doesn't say anything specific other than that, so just add them and keep the sign. 15 plus 4 is going to be what? 19. A negative plus a negative means it's going to add to be another negative. Okay. Someone want to lead us through the keep, change, opposite here? What am I keeping? We're going to keep 2.1. What am I changing? Subtraction to addition. What am I oppositing? That doesn't make sense. What do I mean by opposite? -9.6. So my problem now becomes 2.1 plus -9.6. Okay. You got 50-50 shot. Do I add or subtract? And if you're not sure, look here. It says positive plus negative. What's it say about positive plus negative? It says we're going to subtract them, doesn't it? So when you go to subtract, always put the bigger number on top. So 9.6 minus 2.1. I line up my decimals. 6 minus 1 is 5. 9 minus 2 is 7. What type of 7.5? Positive or negative? 9.6 is larger and negative. Almost forgot to write. Negative 7.5. Okay. 4.8 minus negative 8.7. Keep, change, so keeping 4.8, changing subtraction to addition, and the opposite of negative 8.7 is positive 8.7. What did this problem just become? 4.8 plus 8.7? It's good to know, guys, minus and negative is the same as just saying plus. So, add them up. 4.8 plus 8.7. Notice I lined up my decimal points again. 8 plus 7 is what? 15. Carry the 1.
I was looking at.
I'm assuming when I heard 5, you meant...
Yeah, I was looking at my phone.
Okay, so 15, carry the 1. Notice I lined up my decimals and carried the decimal point down. 4 plus 8 plus the carried 1. 13. For a final answer of 13.5. Okay. What about those fractions? We need a common denominator. What can, well, and actually even before that, well, we've got two different things to do here, I guess. What can 2 and 16 both go into? Huh?
8.
Not 8. Because we have to use a number, it has to be at least as big as 16. You can't go smaller than 16 for a common denominator. But does 2 go into 16? Yeah, 16 divides by 2, doesn't it? So we're going to use a common denominator of 16. 7 over 16? That's already 16, so I'm just going to say 7 over 16. What about this 1/2? 2 times what is 16? 2 times 8. So on top, 1 times 8 is 8. Now, I kind of skipped over. We probably should have dealt with this at the beginning, but I don't know. Are we going to be adding or subtracting here? If I keep 7/16, change subtraction to addition, and what's the opposite of negative 1/2? Positive 1/2. And what did I mention earlier? Minus and negative is always going to end up being plus a positive. 7/16 plus 8/16 is 15 over 16. Keep the denominator as is. and add 7 plus 8. Okay, one more. Negative 12 minus 12. Do we have thoughts on this one? I'm curious. Did you do your keep, change, opposite? Keep, negative 12. Change subtraction to addition. And what's the opposite of 12? Negative 12. So I'm going to end up with negative 12 plus negative 12. What happens when I add a negative plus a negative? A negative plus a negative is a negative. If that just says a negative plus a negative is a negative and it's under the add rules, that means we're going to add and get a negative. What is 12 plus 12? 24. And a negative plus a negative is going to be a negative. Negative 24. Okay. Hopefully that was a little review. How well you remembered it is a different story, right? Okay. The homework that goes with this is lesson 1.5 in Math Excel.